Hey folks, welcome to episode 11 of Tea and Type, your time to chill and make words. I'm MK England, and with me as always is my wonderful co-host Jamie.
Hi everybody, I'm Jamie Packton, and tonight we are so thrilled. We have one of our Pitch Wars 2015 fellow mentees with us, Kristen Ciccarelli is here. So,
you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your book?
Sure. Yes, you did that well. Ciccarelli is how you pronounce my last name. I am Kristen Ciccarelli, and my debut just came out just under 2 weeks ago. It's the LAST NAMSARA. It's very
and the cover is so pretty, shiny.
Yeah, and it's about Asha, who is the king's prize dragon hunter, and she must hunt down a deadly dragon and bring her father its head, or she'll be forced into a political marriage.
It's an amazing book. I devoured it. Yes, it is.
Thank you.
And I am partway through it right now, and if you spoil anything, I will kill you. So before we launch into all of the things that we want to ask Kristen this week, let's start off with our usual, what are you drinking this week? Jamie, what you got? Your usual?
Sport tea in a giant mug. I'm predictable. Megan?
I like the giant mug. I am drinking one of my random, almost 7-year-old teas from Germany that I got that one time that are in horrible, my horrible mixed up Ziploc bags. But I'm pretty sure this one is apricot champagne and it's delicious. I love it.
Amazing. Kristen?
Kristen, what you got?
Well, right now I'm drinking Perrier, grapefruit flavored Perrier. But just before this, I had a very small shot of Knob Creek. Bourbon.
Nice. Awesome. Starting it off well.
Support this. I will enjoy my bourbon after the show. So tonight what we're going to talk to Kristen about we have many questions and a very short time, but we're going to kind of focus in two ways. So we're going to talk about debut experience and then world building, just to kind of build on our start to finish series. But let's start with the debut experience. And Megan, Megan's going to be a debut author soon enough. So what questions do you have?
So, yes, I will selfishly say, teach me everything, Kristen. I need to know all the things. So first things first, you just got back from tour. So where were you and how long was this tour? Were there any awesome highlights from your time?
Yeah. Okay. So I started off in New York. And for New York Comic Con, I had 2 events. I was on a panel, and then I had a meetup. And then from there, I went to Missouri, and then Virginia, and then California, and then back to Toronto, which is sort of where I'm from, close to Toronto. And it was really fantastic. I got sick the second day, even though I had been even though I had been trying to guard myself against sickness by downing all of the emergency, but it didn't work. Yeah. So, but it was still great. I was sick and it was so great. I think my favorite part was actually meeting readers and the Epic Reads. I don't know if you're familiar with the Epic Reads meetup tour, but I personally really loved it because I got really a lot of one-on-one time with kind of every person who showed up, with readers basically, which was really, really fun for me. I love one-on-one.
What was your panel about for Comic-Con?
Oh gosh, the panel was terrifying, I have to say, because it's it was my first event and it's my first time at Comic-Con, and I'm with all of these authors who are they have 7 books behind them, and they've done this before, so it was very intimidating. But it was about, I think the title was Dragons and Eternal Beasties, and it was mostly about dragons and eternal beasties and how they played out in our books and how they were different in our books versus the traditions they come from and that sort of thing.
Which is a wonderful panel idea. I would love to talk dragons with you all day long because, I mean, your dragons are nuanced for sure. And I love dragon books, but I do think that's a challenge, right, as a writer. And this was one of my world building questions, but we could just maybe slide it in here, which is to say, did you work very hard to make these dragons different, or did they just sort of evolve? Were you thinking about all the dragon books you'd ever read and you said, you know what, I need to make my dragon stand out? You know what I mean? Let's talk about them dragons.
Yeah. Well, you have to have like some sort of twist on dragons, because dragons have been done a lot of times and everyone really loves dragons. So you're kind of under a lot of scrutiny, I think, if you're writing any kind of mythological creature that has been done a lot of times and is kind of beloved. So my dragons are kind of the same as the dragons that I grew up with. So first of all, I would say that my top 3 dragons of all time would be Smog, Draco from Dragonheart, if anyone remembers Dragonheart, and Toothless. Those are probably my top 3 dragons. And so I was very much writing in a tradition that I grew up in, so mostly a Western tradition. And so they're the same in that they're kind of essentially winged reptiles. So I did a lot of reptile research to just kind of make them realistic. But then also the twist that I added was that they are, instead of like hoarding treasure or like being really like covetous of treasure, they're attracted to stories, and particularly a certain kind of story in my book. So that would be my twist, or the way that I made them a bit new. But
I think it's a great twist, and it's absolutely, I think, what's so eye-catching about your series. Like, yeah, girl fighting dragon. Wait a minute, these dragons eat stories, and it's delicious, you know. And yeah, and I think I now want to ask everyone I know who are your top 3 dragons.
Because I adore that, and I would actually have to think really hard about that.
Yeah,
so some other time.
I will reflect on it for next week.
Oh, Kristen, I'm so sorry you're sick. I feel like every single debut author I know gets sick during like the first week or 2 after their book releases. Yes. And it's got to be a combination of like the stress of release, like depressing your immune system, and then like shaking a million hands or meeting a ton of people and just bathing in all of those germs. Wonderful.
Yes.
I once interviewed John Flanagan, the guy that writes The Ranger's Apprentice, and he was absolutely, it was a great interview, but he was so sick the whole time, like honey in the tea, and so I do agree. I think it's a tour thing, and
but I just hope that I didn't get like all of my fellow authors sick.
Hi, I'm Kristen. Have a hug. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Do we have any more debut questions?
Yeah, sure. Just one more, and then we can focus on world building. What was the hardest part of this whole debut experience?
Okay. I think probably. I feel like there's been a shift in me since the book has come out, and I think it's because like now that it's come out, it's like done. Like I can't take it back. My publisher can't take it back. I mean, I guess they could technically, maybe, but it's sort of like, I think the hardest part about the debut year is the uncertainty and the lack of control. Like you literally have no control. You have no idea what to expect. You don't know if the book is going to sell. You don't know if people are going to like it. Like there's just so many unknowns, which is really terrifying. As much as it's like exciting, it's also just really scary. And this has been probably the best and worst year of my life, in that it's been like a very scary year. Like it's just like, you just don't know. You have no idea what's going to happen. And that's, for some people, maybe that like, for more enlightened people than I, maybe that would be fine. But for me, it was really hard.
No, that sounds like a giant ball of anxiety to me. So yeah. I will probably be with you. Thank you for your wisdom. I'll be prepared.
Yeah. Well, and I think like, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say the anxiety never ends when you're querying, when you're, I mean, you're doing edits, like all these things. So it's good to know it maintains. But I mean, is it lifted a little bit now that it's out there? And
yes, and I think too, like I spent so long, just like in that uncertainty and like really being afraid, that I came to a point where like I was actively choosing. I was actively I was seeing that it was not scared, and like trying to like sort of ground myself and like find like who I was again, because it is really easy to lose yourself. Like it's like, oh, you have this book and like it's like this dream that you've been working towards for so long, and it's easy to sort of get tied up in that and forget like your core almost. I don't know if that makes sense, but like really trying to like stay grounded in yourself and find your joy, I think were 2 things that really helped me, because it is so easy to get swept up in the fear and the excitement.
And not necessarily to ask you personally what you did, but what would you say people should do to find your joy? Like, do your other hobbies or spend time with your family, that kind of thing? Like,
yeah.
Was writing like still joyful? Because I know you finished book 2, right, while you were kind of waiting.
Yeah, that's a whole conversation in itself. Writing has definitely changed for me. Megan, maybe it's already changed for you too.
Yeah.
Because it's not really something that you do like for fun or to play. It's like a job now, and you have a deadline, and you have people kind of looking over your shoulder, like waiting for the next thing. So it has to change, and it's good and bad, I think. Like it changes in good and bad ways. And I think for me, it was really helpful. We were talking about this before the show started, but like actually shutting off the internet and like really being really intentional with like the real world around you and the people around you. Yeah, I would say that actually is like that was the key thing for me, is like shutting off the internet. Not forever, but just like really prioritizing like what is like right in front of me was really helpful.
No, and I think, you know, one of the things, it's, you know, like you said, Jamie, this is part of the process from the start, that sort of level of anxiety, and it absolutely changes over the course of, you know, this whole publishing process. But I think one of the things you can do at any point is just pay really close attention to that internal narrative. And at some point I noticed that I was approaching my writing with like thoughts of dread or thoughts of worry or, you know, any kind of negative thought. And I was like, well, this is not going to help me write. What's going to help me write is if I change that internal narrative and say, awesome, it's time to write now. Or I'm really excited about this new book idea or something like that. And just changing the way I'm talking to myself about writing has a huge effect for me personally.
I found I came to a point where this is my book 2. In book 2, I every debut author I've talked to has told me that book 2 is just hell. Like, that's just the way it is. You kind of just have to get through it. And I found for me it was really helpful asking myself the question, what would make me love this book? What would make me love spending time with this book? And that was I just sort of clung to that question. It was helpful for me. But
I think I can only add to this because I am still just back in the query trenches again. But after, you know, the first book not selling and everything else that happened, I mean, like, it was hard. I wrote another book, and then after that it was really hard to dig deep and find a new idea. And so the book I'm writing right now is funny and just a little bit snarky, and it's exactly the book like I would need to read right now. And I think that kind of helped me a bit too, is just, I mean, like you said, to cling to, why do I want to approach this again? And I think that that's it's not necessarily the book 2 after this grand expectation, but I think every time we approach a project, we have to kind of rethink about why we do this. Because I mean, it is so much easier to sit in front of the TV with my husband and drink bourbon than it is to sit in front of my computer and write words. That, like, I saw this thing with Judy Blume, and she's talking about how the first draft is just excruciating for her. And I love that because it's terrible. It's the worst. Like, you know, revising your first draft is great. But I find it refreshing, at least, that both of you who have had great success are like, you know, I love that you struggle. Thanks.
Yes, it is a struggle. Yeah, for sure.
For sure. So I guess for me, this connects to world building. So for me, one of the things that is that sort of spark of joy in a story for me is the world building. Like, for all of my stories, I have to have some kind of ooh shiny thing. And it can be a piece of technology, it can be a magic system, it can be anything, as long as it makes me think like, ooh, this is cool. Was there something like that for you in The Last NAMSARA?
Besides dragons that eat stories. So.
Yes, I mean, that is basically the most awesome thing ever. But
yes, I have always been obsessed with dragons. So dragons, and obviously stories too. So like combining those two things was pretty delightful for me. I would say the mythology was really fun, and like having, like, playing with stories. So in the book, Asha is a storyteller, and she uses stories to lure dragons. And so the stories are actually in there, like complete in between the chapters that she's telling. And yeah, I had a lot of fun with that and like building the mythology and like there's like these two twin gods.
Those are beautiful stories in there for sure.
Thank you. I had a ton of fun with those.
So did you write those before? And my question comes actually out of the book that I'm querying right now. There are legends as well that are stories. And what I found is when I couldn't write my plot forward, I said, take a break, go write a legend. And I'd sit there and I'd write like 3,000 words of legend, and it just flowed so easily. And then I'd get back to writing the plot. And so one of my questions for you is, with your stories, did you come to those first, or were those easier to write, or did you write them kind of organically along the way, or how did that fit into your world building, I guess?
Yeah. So they before Pitch Wars, they weren't like special and separated out. They were just sort of in the chapter, and I don't think they were ever really complete. Like Asha would be telling them, and then it would sort of trail off because a dragon would come or something. So that definitely changed. Like I definitely lifted them out of the narrative and put them in between chapters. Yeah, but I would say the same thing. Like it is sort of refreshing just writing like 2 pages of a complete story. Yeah. And that story being not separate, but actually like embedded in a world, and it like explains backstory. It explains the history of like maybe the person, or like her family or her people, or I don't know. It was. Yeah, I can see. I would agree with you that it was a good break from the actual, because novels are weighty things. They're like 300 to 400 pages, like, right. And they kind of like you're always feeling like you're losing the threads. And whereas those are definitely.
Well, I actually write short stories out of, like, when I finished the one I just finished, I started writing short stories before jumping into like maybe book 2 or whatever. And I think that's a helpful way too, to just play in your world again and say like, what's this minor character doing? And you can finish something. You can finish something in a week, and it feels so good, Megan, do you do that with your books at all?
I don't. I have always had a lot of trouble with short stories, actually. I am not a short form author at all. I used to write short stories all the time when I was a teenager, and since then I've written maybe 4 ever.
Killer fan fiction, so those are
well, I mean, if that counts, then sure, I've written lots of short stories, but in that there's so much setup already built in there that short stories are such a compressed form that I personally find them very difficult, and I have trouble having ideas that can fit into short story packages, if that makes sense. I get out of control very quickly. So I guess I have one last question for you, Kristen, to wrap things up. So everybody kind of starts their books in different places. Some people start with a character. Some people have to start with like a plot thread or something. And world building is always something that goes on, throughout the entire book. But where does world building come for you in the planning process?
I would say as late as possible. It's like the worst part for me. It is like the most work for me.
I can't believe that. You built such a gorgeous, detailed world.
You cannot tell from the book.
Really? Okay. Yeah, it is painful, world building. But I remember, I think it was maybe actually Maggie Stiefvater who originally put this metaphor in my head about writing being kind of like painting. And so for me, I would say, I think I'm stealing this from Maggie Stiefvater, but I'm not sure. For me, like, character and plot come first. Character comes first, and character always informs plot. And so for me, like, if for the people who paint out there, or even just drawing, like sketching out the bones of the picture is like character and plot, and then putting down is character, and then putting down, like, blocking out your main colors is kind of plot, and then putting in the details is world building. So it always comes towards the end, and it's very much about details. Yeah,
which is fascinating, because I think V. Schwab, I think we've talked about this before, Megan. I read somewhere that she starts with world building. She builds this world, and she's like, who are the people and what's the story I need to find? And I don't work that way, but I think that is amazing.
I sometimes do, yeah. And get more into that next week for World Building Part 2. We have a whole lot more to talk about on this topic. So we will delve in further next week. For now, we'll move on to our thing. Jamie's got a thing. One more question. Sorry.
No, it's part of, I mean, it's one of our important questions. I want to know what's your favorite bit of world building from your book? Anything that you just love and you're so glad you got to keep. Yeah.
Oh, that's a hard question. That I'm specific, and I'm so glad I got to keep. I think like maybe the traditions. So there's so in my book there's 2 twin gods, and sorry, Namsara and Askari. And from those 2 twin gods come 2 traditions. The main tradition is like a heroic tradition. So every hero who kind of rises up in times of trouble is called a Namsara after the god Namsara. But then Asha is given the title Askari after the goddess Askari, who is like not a good, well, I love her, but she's not a good goddess. And so she like is the beginning of an anti-hero tradition. I think maybe that's my favorite bit of world building.
I loved that part. Yeah. So okay. I'm glad you kept that too. All right, Megan.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I love that. So we are going to wrap things up with by recommending a thing this week. So it can be a book, a TV show, a movie, you know, anything about life. I just got back from a writing retreat. I was completely off the grid from Friday evening through the middle of the afternoon on Sunday. So I'm going to recommend, like Kristen talked about earlier, unplugging your router, like take it in the backyard and bury it or something. Like turn off your phone and put it out in the car or something like that and see how that changes your day. Because I was out in the middle of nowhere mountains, Virginia, and I did not have cell phone signal and there was no wireless, and it was glorious. And I got so much done, I can't even tell you. It was really, really exciting, and it was exactly the boost I needed to get my butt in gear to write 2 books before the end of the year. Good luck, me. One of them's middle grade, so it's shorter.
All right, yeah. We're going to hold you to that. We're going to do check-ins on that. Kristen, what do you recommend?
Well, seconding what Megan said, and for me, I actually get my husband to, so he has like created my passcode on my iPhone, so he can like log me in and log me out, and I can take off things off of my phone, and like it's so I'm like locked out of things. I highly recommend that if you have zero self-control like I do. And then when he comes home, he'll like log me back in or whatever. But anyways,
brilliant.
So I recommend that. But I also recommend this book. I read it on my tour, Far From the Tree. It's just really beautiful, and like I really cried, but not in a like all the bright places kind of crying, like not because I was like my soul was destroyed and I was so sad. It was more like a life is beautiful, and even in like sort of like hard things, life is beautiful and hopeful. So I really recommend this book.
Wasn't that a National Book Award finalist too?
It is, yes, yeah. And I got to meet her at the end of my tour, which was lovely. She's lovely.
Oh, awesome.
I think I've seen her talk once, and
okay.
Yeah. I'm not recommending anything smart this week. I'm on a Rick and Morty binge with my husband, and and I'm still reading Fable Haven #2 with my 7-year-old. So I'm pretty knee deep in this draft, and so when I'm knee deep in a draft, I have to actually give like my brain candy in other ways. I can't read anything too serious or too thoughtful. Although Megan, I can't wait until our episode of Reading Like a Writer, because I've got lots of ideas on that. But anyways, yeah. So I recommend just giving yourself a break, and also laughing a little bit. So yeah, I think that's it. Mm-hmm. Kristen, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. And if you want to get some work done tonight, you can join us over on #TeaandType on Twitter. We are going to do a half-hour sprint from the 30-minute or the halfway point of this hour till the end of the hour, depending on what time zone you're in, 10 o'clock Eastern. So come on over there, focus with us for half an hour. Don't worry about your specific goal, just get something done. You can follow us over there. I'm Geektastic Lib, Jamie is Jamie Pacton, and Kristen is not on Twitter, but you can go hang out with her on Instagram at Kristen Ciccarelli. You aren't on Twitter, right? You haven't like magically made a Twitter
I have a parked page, but I don't tweet. But it's She Lures Dragons is my parked page. Yeah,
nice. That's great.
I like it. All right. And don't forget to subscribe below because we have another episode coming your way on Monday, October 23rd, and it's going to be World Building Part 2. This has been Tea and Type. Let's go make some words together.
Bye.
Bye.